Grady and his son Blake go hunting in the forest. Blake continues to be distracted by things such as the mushrooms and the birds, and so Grady chastises him and tells him that it is important to pay attention to survive. At this point, Blake hears something outside and Grady reminds him that it is a deer. When he rounds, Grady is about to shoot it, but the deer flees. Later on, when Grady turns round, he is unable to locate his son. In the meantime, Blake has located a good vantage on which to await the deer, but in its place beholds an enigmatic creature who after a few moments vanishes. As Blake attempts to locate it once more, he picks up on some growling. Blake is terrified and starts to walk back as he can hear the growling getting louder. The appearance of a figure startles sudden Blake, but it is Grady reprimanding him on his failure to obey commands. Further rustling is heard in the trees, and Grady feels threatened, so he and Blake run to seek refuge in the hunting blind. Grady loads his gun as some unknown animal is climbing the ladder to reach them. It attempts to smash down the door, unsuccessfully, then wanders across the blind to attempt access to the ladder by the back. Then some form of animal is seen, and the creature leaps to attack it. Looking in, Grady finds a mauled deer on the ground. He sees the beast too and attempts to shoot it, but it instantly flees off and we can hear its howling in the woods. Blake questions what that was, and Grady refers to it as a bear. On the same night, Grady calls his friend Dan and informs him that he has seen the wolf. It turns out that he has been making notes and that he has been studying this elusive creature a long time, but Dan does not see the need to run after it. Yet, Grady says that it is to save their kids. Blake hears this when he looks at the tattoo on his dad. Blake is married to Charlotte 30 years later, and they have a daughter named Ginger. One night, Blake gets a letter of great importance, which contains some keys. His father, it happens, has been officially pronounced dead by the state of Oregon, lost years ago. Blake had imagined this would come sooner or later, but he is still in shock. He would have liked to have had more time with his father, which he is shown to have left as soon as he was old enough. The following day, Blake goes to see Charlotte at work and informs her that he thinks they have not been spending enough time together recently, and that receiving the letter in the mail has made him miss his loved ones. Because he has to go to Oregon to collect everything Grady had, Blake says that they can spend the entire summer there. Further on the road to Oregon, Blake halts the truck after seeing 2 roads ahead. He attempts to look up his location on his phone map, but there is no service here. It is at this time that Ginger spots a man in the hunting blind and informs her parents about the armed man. This is Derek, son of Dan and childhood friend of Blake. Derek tells him that there are not so many of the folk living about now, and that the old road to the old farm of Grady is overgrown, but he offers to drive them there and gets in the motor. This is interrupted in the evening when the strange animal suddenly appears in the middle of the road and proves that he is a wolf. Blake easily swerves the car to avoid hitting him, but instead it crashes into a ditch and gets stuck on a tree. Fortunately, Blake wakes up and examines his family, who are okay. Derek wishes to get out and opens the door, but falls to the ground due to the truck being on its side. Blake instructs his family to creep through the window, but just then, they hear some growling. They notice the wolf coming towards them in the rearview mirror, and Blake is quick to grab the door and close it as he watches a bleeding Derek crawl on the ground. The wolf pushes the window open, and the glass shatters, injuring Blake. Then the wolf leaps onto Derek and kills him and drags away the dead body. Blake and his family take the opportunity to leap off the truck and seek the house of Grady. When they eventually see it, the wolf will be behind them, and he will start chasing them. The family runs as quickly as possible and manages to finally arrive at the building. They tiptoe in and shut the door, which makes the wolf begin to pound on it, and Blake keeps it close. Several minutes of pounding has passed, and the creature retreats. Then Blake picks up a flashlight and enters the basement to switch on the generator. Now the house and the farm buildings can be lighted. Ginger wants to go home, but Blake tells them it is dangerous at night and they will have to wait till morning. He too regrets his failure to save her, and they both bond together. Charlotte is wondering what sort of thing was on the road, and Blake says he saw an animal standing on 2 legs like a person. Then Blake blocks the door with a cupboard and takes the old radio belonging to his father to see if he can get someone to hear, but no one replies. At this point, he detects an unusual odor and leads it to a different room, where much to his surprise, he discovers plenty of meat and jerky. He tries it, but then his jaw begins to pest him, so he figures that he struck his face on the wheel in the crash. One of his teeth suddenly breaks and falls out of his mouth, and thus a concerned Charlotte makes Blake sit to examine his injuries. It has a deep cut on his arm, and she goes on to clean it and theorizes that he must have been banged on the broken window, but Charlotte insists that it does not look like a glass cut. She wraps the arm and goes to the radio to continue trying. Later on, Blake starts nailing some wood on the floor in front of the cupboard at the door in case the weight falls over, but his hands are shaking and he is unable to hold the hammer well and strikes his fingers. He sweats like a madman and is going to the kitchen to take some water when he hears thumping in the distance. He goes up the steps with the hammer in his hand and he realizes that it is in a certain room. Blake enters slowly and finds out that the sound is in the wardrobe. As he uncovers it, he is puzzled by the fact that the sound has been produced by a spider. Suddenly, Blake begins to feel dizzy and cannot breathe. It only takes a few seconds, and even after he eventually feels well again, he descends and visits his family. Charlotte and Ginger are okay on the couch, yet Blake can hear footsteps coming their way, which is not to mention more growling sounds. He gradually walks towards the window and begins sniffing the air as someone goes past by. Charlotte observes the actions of her husband, and she considers it to be weird. As Blake goes to the door, the wolf gets in via the pet door and takes him by the leg in an attempt to drag him out. But Charlotte takes the hammer and smacks the wolf on the arm to make him drop him. Blake dies by screaming in excruciating pain. Blake later wakes up on the couch and attempts to look around, searching his family. However, all he hears is a strange, distorted sound. He traces it down to the basement where he spots Ginger asleep, and Charlotte continues her attempts to get someone to help her on the radio. The next time she fails, she throws the microphone in frustration. At this point, she hears Blake wheezing and turns to face Blake, who is standing in the darkness. As he is approaching her, Blake attempts to speak, but all that can be heard is mumbling in his mouth. As Charlotte describes that she is concerned about him but does not know how to react, Blake begins to wet his pants, and she has to bring him upstairs. Blake finds out that his hair is falling off as he lays down. Charlotte comes with a piece of paper and a pen as he wants to know whether he could communicate through writing. Blake picks up the pen and struggles to write, yet with some efforts he is able to spell dying. Charlotte tells him that he is only ill and will be fine in a little time. As she keeps talking of love and affection, Blake is gazing on since he cannot hear what she has to say, and his eyes have been distorted to have slight blue color. He attempts to explain to her what is going on to him, but Charlotte is unable to comprehend him as well. Blake feels that there is blood in his hand when he attempts to speak to his daughter. Charlotte untapes the sleeves of Blake and frees the bandage to find his arm in a horrible state after telling Ginger to wait in the other room. A hissing Blake spooks and flees out of his wife to begin scratching his arm maniacally against the wall. To the horror of Charlotte, Blake then begins to eat the wound, and the more he chews, the more teeth come off. He halts abruptly and gazes at terrified Charlotte some seconds, then walks away. Charlotte trails him, but as they are unable to converse, she abandons him. Then Charlotte peeps out of the window and can see the old car belonging to Grady outside, and she hurries down to get the keys and a battery, and then a knife in the kitchen. She forcefully takes her family to the car, and she has to assist Blake to take the back seat as he is barely able to move. As she assists Ginger as well, they can hear a howl in the vicinity once more. Charlotte runs to the hood and attaches the battery to the engine, and Ginger looks on Blake, who is already turning into a wolf. Then Charlotte goes to the driving seat and attempts to start up the car. The car initially fails to start, although on subsequent attempts it starts. Charlotte unplugs the battery and goes back to the wheel, but as they are about to walk away, the wolf shows up on the hood of the car. It crashes the window and breaks the gear level, and hence Charlotte begins to attack it with the knife. It distracts the beast to the extent that the family already left the car and ran away. Still, the wolf is chasing them, and they succeed in climbing to the top of the greenhouse, and Blake takes the ladder off the structure to ensure that the creature cannot track them. The wolf does not give up, and he gets into the greenhouse and waits. In a short time, the tent is not able to support the weight of 3 persons anymore, and the pins begin falling away. Meanwhile, the wolf starts leaping to cut the ceiling and making numerous holes. Ginger then, terrified, attempts to go to her mother, but falls into a hole. Her parents get a hold of her and get her out of the jaws of the wolf before the wolf can maim her. Some growling is employed by Blake to urge his family to turn back by pointing at the house, and he leaps out of the greenhouse and begins to run away into the forest. Charlotte and Ginger hurry back indoors since the wolf pursues him. Overhearing all the growling, the howling, Ginger screams to her mother that she was leaving her father alone, and Charlotte must get in her defense that Blake was only trying to save her. That is when they hear growling outside. Thus, Charlotte peeks out of the window to verify that it is Blake before she opens the door. He enters the house and falls on the living room floor as his body is still turning into something hideous. Ginger approaches, and initially she is shocked by his snarling, but she attempts again and caresses his forehead. She informs him that she loves him, but Blake is unable to comprehend her. His eyesight is now even bluer and distorted. Suddenly, Blake runs over and begins to vomit large quantities of blood as his nails fall off. Ginger screams of horror, and Charlotte drags her along as Blake is appalled to see a human finger in his vomit. Then he yells and leaps on the table in order to get to his family, growling at Charlotte, who will not flinch. Direct eye contact with his wife can help Blake to relax, and he attempts to exit the house, only to be tackled down to the ground by the wolf as soon as he opens the door. The beast bites Blake and begins beating him up as they both fight on the floor. The wolf starts to hit Blake on the walls and furniture after several hits. Charlotte dashes in to plunge a knife in the creature in the back, which makes him begin to run after her and Ginger. He tells him that he lost a finger. The one Blake spit on. As Charlotte conceals her daughter in a different room, Blake obstructs the path of the wolf so as to begin fighting him once again. Further biting and punching leads to the unconsciousness of Blake. Then the wolf begins pulling the body of Blake down the corridor, and hence Charlotte takes a fire poker to strike him behind and distract his attention off the room with Ginger. She even hits him on the face, but the wolf avoids being hit on the third time. Suddenly, Blake attacks the beast and holds him on the ground so that he can bite his neck and ensure that he goes deep enough to kill him. That being said, finally, Blake has a closer look at this creature and realizes the tattoo on his arm. It happens to be his father Grady, who had been turned into a werewolf when he had disappeared several years ago and had now transferred the curse on his son. Feeling agonized and painful emotions, Blake hurries out of doors and collapses because his transformation has reached its final point. His nails turn into claws, his skin gets more hair, and his teeth now turn into fangs. His sight finally clears, and he understands that the sounds that he has been hearing are all caused by his enhanced senses. Blake has now become a full-fledged werewolf and gives a great roar. Charlotte is consoling Ginger in the house when the power cuts off. She peeps through the window and shocks at seeing her husband completely changed before he runs into the house. Charlotte takes the knife in case and tracks the noises to then turn round and see Blake behind Ginger. As he makes advances, Charlotte cuts his arm so that he steals the knife out of her. After that, the two rush out of the house to conceal themselves in the barn. Minutes later, Blake shows up at the door and destroys the wood, then digs under it to enter as well. Since he is able to see through the dark, therefore, he can get near to his family without them realizing it. Wet, however, as he makes one more step, his foot gets stuck in a bear trap, which Charlotte has prepared. Mother and daughter scream as they turn on a flashlight and make a runaway with Blake after them, but later on to find the trap holding him chained. The foot is cut off since they do not see another way. Blake then runs after his family to the forest where they discover the arm of Derek and the truck still trapped in a tree. Charlotte takes the gun of Derek, and she and Ginger take off to conceal themselves in the hunting blind again. Very soon, Blake is up the ladder and gazing upon his family, low growling to them. Ginger knows that her dad would prefer that this is over, and when he attempts to intervene, the first thing that Charlotte does is to yank back and shoot the gun. Ginger and Charlotte go and watch Blake die and weep together with him. Mother and daughter look into the beautiful valley that Blake adored as a girl in the morning.